Welcome to the MS&Me Radio Network. The broadcast shows are for informational and entertainment purposes only. They are not designed to provide listeners with specific personal, medical, or counseling advice. Individuals with a medical issue should always consult their healthcare provider. MS&Me is not responsible for content of individual shows. The views expressed by show hosts or their guests are their own. Enjoy the show.
Hey y'all, and welcome to Straight Up with MS and all its crazy little circles here on MS&Me Radio, brought to you by the MS Global Support Network. I'm your host, Patty Long, and you can find me on Twitter at MSNit for life, and I spell that MSENIT, the number 4, LIFE. And that's just what we're doing here is we're MSing it really for a life, not just for the rest of your life, but we need to wear our MS well and be friends with it, and just so we can be the best that we can be, and get rid of all those snails in your life. All those ignorant people just sort of make you sicker, So if you can, ditch them. If you can't, then learn to ignore it. Grow thick skin, and don't listen, and don't judge yourself based on what other people say. Never, ever judge yourself based on what other people say, because you know the truth. You and only you. Well, and others like you. But, if you're like me, okay, I live in the South. In the South, we have plenty of sunshine, and we get lots of vitamin D. If we are people like myself who spend a lot of time outside. I record my shows outside. And it's just more peaceful to me to be outside. And we want that peacefulness in our lives. So, my vitamin D was never ever low. Now, I started taking vitamin D after I started seeing Dr. English because, like all of our numbers, we have a range. And the normal range is this big, huge range. And so I want to be at the top of that big, huge range, not at the bottom. I want to be at the top. And to be at the top, well, then I added some vitamin D. Now, it was also wintertime, and the sun is further away. So even though I'm outside, I'm also covered up more and all of this kind of stuff. But in the wintertime, I take a little bit more than I do in the summertime, simply because I don't get as much sun on my face, on my shoulders, on my arms, and I always have a farmer's tan, as they call it, because, I don't lay out in the sun, and I never have. Although I used to ride around in a boat and go swimming a lot, so it wasn't as noticeable as it will be, this summer, for instance. But I'm going to try and work on that some. But in any case, try and get rid of the snails. I know, all this stuff is real. And if they don't want to believe it, then that's kind of their problem, not yours. And learning how to handle it. And that's a hard thing to do. It really is. But once you do, you will feel this tremendous weight lift off of you. And life will be good again. So, I highly suggest writing things down and then not reading them. But write down all those feelings, all that stuff that makes you cry or makes you mad. Write it all down. And write down the good stuff too, but you know, if you're struggling with this still, then it's probably going to be like mine was and full of the other end of the emotional spectrum. And, it got really bad for me before it got any better. And that wasn't solely because my MS was growing wildly out of control for 2.5 years, but it was also because of all these ignorant people and the comments I would hear. And I let it make me sicker. I did. And I now know that that was a choice. I could have made the choice sooner to get rid of these ignorant folks out of my life, and I could have made the choice sooner to not care about what other people thought, and to realize that the only person whose opinion of me matters is my own. You know, we want people to like us and all of that, but when push comes to shove, your own opinion of you is way more important than anybody else's. And that's kind of a freeing thing to learn. And you think you know it, but then you're getting your feelings hurt and you're getting angry by these comments. So you may know it, but maybe it hasn't hit home. So write it all down and then don't read it. I boxed everything I wrote up. Some of it was on the computer or my phone, and I have no clue, what's where. Some of it was in actual notebooks. Some of it was on napkins or scrap sheets of paper. But anything that I find that I have written on now goes in a box. And I've got a very large box full of these things. But I do not read them. And I don't read them because I don't need to go back to that place again. Once I wrote it down and it was history, it was history. And that's sort of the point of writing it out, because that way it becomes history. And then on my board, I write the things I need to remember, like my opinion is the only one that matters when it comes to me. Now, the opinion of other things, it's not just up to me, but when it comes to opinions of me, then mine is the one that matters. And I put up there, today is going to be a great day. And I always start out my day with, today is going to be a great day. Until last Friday. Which actually last Friday I did say today is going to be a great day. But by Friday afternoon, I wasn't thinking that or saying that anymore. And it's kind of ironic because last Thursday I did my show. I recorded it, the one that aired last Saturday for the first time in all of last week, and that you can now find on the YouTube reruns. They have a playlist on MS&Me Radio and Media, and you can find everybody's old episodes. But mine last week was, I called it Do I Believe? And it was about permanent damage. Do I believe in permanent damage, or do I not believe in permanent damage? And I was left very flip-floppity, which is why I kept avoiding this answer, because I don't really have an answer. It is very individual. I just can give you my philosophy on things and what I think of things. So Friday afternoon, when all my symptoms my issues of the past started coming back and I was feeling really bad, I realized that my temperature was going up and I was getting sick. Oh my gosh, did I get sick. I'm still a little sick, but not a lot sick. My daughter says it doesn't matter. A little sick is still sick. But it does matter because I had a fever of 101 plus for many days. Half a day Friday, all day Saturday, all day Sunday, all day Monday, and sometime in the wee hours of Wednesday morning before I woke up, my fever broke. I woke up in a puddle. But that many days in a row with this high fever and a sore throat, sore ears, a barking bronchitis type of cough, And I mean, I was really sick in the usual fashion. And what that did to my MS was basically like having a relapse, only it wasn't. In a relapse, your symptoms become worse and worse and worse, and they don't flip-flop. Or they get worse to a point and then they stay steady, but they don't flip-flop. If you are sick with a virus, sick with a fever, then your symptoms get extremely bad, but they're flip-floppy. So I know this, and I knew not to worry about my MS, despite the fact that even though I haven't felt like my shin bones were breaking in a very long time, and I told you guys that last week, because it felt when I would stand on my legs at first, it felt like my shin bones were bowing out and about to snap in two. And I felt that again. Not a pleasant feeling. It hurt so bad to walk. And so I barely walked at all because it hurt too much. But I had to walk. I had to be able to get up and get a drink when I was thirsty. I had to be able to get up and go to the bathroom. I had to be able to get up and take my dog out and to feed my dog. I mean, Hachi means the world to me. I'm not going to leave him trapped in a house all day long. I'm not going to leave him hungry. And while I don't need to take my fish out, I need to feed them or else they're going to eat each other because they're fish and that's what fish do. And I certainly don't want them to be going wild, which it doesn't take very long to turn fish wild. But I didn't want them to be turned wild and then have problems. So, I have to do these things. The things I didn't have to do was the laundry and cleaning up inside or outside. I didn't have to worry about fixing food. I wasn't hungry anyways. And when Sunday rolled around, I whined and cried until my daughter brought me a plate. That was not my intention, but I was whining about not getting to go to her Easter Sunday dinner that she was making. And my daughter is a fantastic cook. And my husband went, and he went on the bike, and he didn't bring me a plate home because, he was on the bike. So, that night at like 8:30, she brought me a plate. Now, I couldn't eat it. I took a bite or two, but I couldn't eat then. And she had told me she brought it and she was going to put it in the refrigerator. I just wanted to try and taste it. And it was so amazingly good. And And I did not get to eat it that day. And the next day I ate just a little bit of it. And then the next day I ate a little more, So I did end up finishing it off. But it was disappointing to miss the whole holiday with my daughter and my grandchildren and the rest of my family. So, but I was sick. And with the sick came the symptoms, all of them, flooding back as if they had never left. So what does that say about permanent damage, Is it real or is it Memorex? Well, I guess it's kind of both. I still feel that way. I still feel like it's both because I have overcome these things. The only time they are a problem now is when I am sick or when I have been in the sunshine and become overheated. And then, of course, when you get overheated and you get this MS heat exhaustion and you kind of collapse and everything comes flooding back, then as soon as you cool down, you are better. And it's kind of like that when you're sick. And of course, I had a fever, so I was in this overheated state for many, many days. And I kept saying, well, I'll go to the doctor if it's not gone tomorrow. I'll go to the doctor if I don't feel better tomorrow. And I really don't like doctors in this area. They just don't seem to know anything about MS. And if I had gone in, they probably wouldn't have done anything for me. It just would have been a waste of time and money. So I did not go. I took Tylenol Cold Max instead, and it helped a lot. But, as it is, these things don't go away on their own, and because of the medications I'm on, I don't want to take a lot of Tylenol. So I did not take it every 4 hours because my liver function is necessary, and I don't want to mess up my liver. And so I take the precautions that I take. I don't, do things that I know are going to affect it strongly, like taking Tylenol every 4 hours, whether it's Tylenol plain and simple or Tylenol Cold Max, which is the combination of ingredients but still has a lot of Tylenol in it. So, when we're sick, we have to be careful not only of the fact that the illness is going to bring our symptoms flooding back, but it's also because the medications that we may take, even though they're over-the-counter meds, might be things that we need to think about a little better and a little closer before we just swallow them. And I take the Tylenol Cold Max because this is what has worked for me my entire life, is this medication. And it started out, it was like Tylenol Cold and Cough. And now it's changed names, and it's changed names very, often, because they have to come out with newer and better, and in some respects maybe it is, but there's very slight differences, and it's worked for me for years. So that's what I take when I get something like this. And I really haven't had anything like this in so long. So I'm thinking I probably picked it up at the pool hall, which, when you go out like that, that possibility exists. because people generally don't know they're sick before they're sick. And a lot of times people think they're not contagious when they are. Now, I know that 48 hours after your fever breaks is when you're supposedly no longer contagious. They used to say 24, and now they're saying 48. So who knows? But the thing is that illnesses like this do happen, but they're not relapses, guys. They are simply the effects of being sick. And so they are kind of flip-floppity. Now, the pain in my legs lasted a long time. That was not a flip-floppity one. Every time I stood on them for 3 days, they felt that way. And that was when my fever was the highest. But my other things, my cognitive skills, I can't even think, the way I could use my arms or not, all of those other things were flip-floppity. How long I could sit up without falling over, because I still have a lot of core weakness. Now, the core weakness is something that I work on, so I'm way stronger than I was when I was sliding out of chairs. But I still have core weakness. So how long I could sit up for at a time without sliding and just sitting, that went way down. And then, I just couldn't do it. But now today I am sitting outside. It's a very pretty sunny day. Probably in the 70s by now. But it's it's about 70, I'd say. And I'm fine. I'm sitting here in the sunshine because I think that the sunshine is really good for us as long as we're not getting overheated. Now, we've already had 80-degree days here. And oh my gosh, an 80-degree day sitting in the sunshine probably would have been a bit much even if I hadn't have been sick. But when I brought Hachi out and it was 80 degrees, and of course there's no shade from our oak trees yet because they still don't have leaves. So where come summertime my back deck will be shaded, right now it's not. So I was in the sunshine to bring him outside and let him run around in the backyard. And of course, my dog is spoiled rotten, guys. So when I brought Hachi out, I was overheated and would have been in serious trouble had I not instantly known as I walked out the door to let him out that it was too hot for me. So I sat in the kitchen floor and waited on him after he went outside. And then he tried to get me up, but I wouldn't let him because he's had some trouble with his hips. So I wouldn't let him. He's trained that way. So if I'm in the floor, he will help me to get up. But instead, I just used other things that were sitting there that I made sure were sitting there and used those to get up. But yeah, I mean, all of it comes flooding back, very much like being overheated does when you have problems with the heat. And, we're coming into summertime, and while it's already getting really hot in South Carolina where I live, and in other southern states, it may not have reached you yet. I know up north where my sister lives, they're about a month behind us as far as weather. So they got another month before they see an 80-degree day at least. And but yeah, be really, really careful of the heat. And also understand what a fever will do to you. And understand that this doesn't mean to check out on life, because you are possibly going to come into contact with others who are sick. It's just simply a fact of life. People get illnesses, the normal variety of illnesses. So, always know your blood tests and where you stand. So I know that my liver function tests, for instance, are always on the verge of being wrong. So I have to watch that. And so you need to kind of understand where you are, so you know when to go to the doctor over one of these illnesses, and that you don't become afraid that you are in a relapse, because the illness itself, while it may feel like you're in a relapse, does not cause a relapse. But it does make your symptoms really, really bad, especially when your fever is high. And let's face it, 101 plus. I think it got up to as high as 102 point something at one point during the day Sunday when it was at its worst. But when it gets really high like that, you are going to have these symptoms come back. They're gonna come flooding back like a relapse, but not. So remember, if it flip-flops and gets a little better at times and a little worse and then a little better, and when I say a little better, I mean just a little bit better. It doesn't have to be a lot better, it doesn't have to be all better, but just a little better, then you know it's not a relapse. And if you are in the sunshine and you feel all your symptoms flooding back and you're not sick, that's not a relapse either. That is what the heat can do to a person with MS. And be very careful of it, because heat problems with MS can become dangerous really quickly. And I can see that my time is already up, but I did think it was important to let you guys know that there's a big, huge difference between your sickness kind of feeling like a relapse, but it's not, because you are sick, and an actual relapse. And I also wanted to let you guys know to be careful now that we're getting into the hotter times of the year, and be aware of it. And we'll probably talk more about the heat itself next time, or maybe the time or two later. But I do gotta go, so let me say bye, and thank you guys for listening. And thank you, Erica Lyons Richardson, for creating this great network. As always, I love you all. Thanks so much. Bye.